Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the breakout session for the Spring Data Users Meeting. This session will focus on some highlights from research at the Economic Research Service. My name is Kelly McGuire. I am the Assistant Administrator at ERS, and I'm pleased to be here with some of my colleagues today to talk to you about some of our ongoing and new research. Just a few housekeeping items to begin. This session is being recorded, and it will be available after the meetings along with a question and answer transcript and the slides from the meeting. Closed captioning is available using the closed caption button on the Zoom ribbon at the bottom of your screen. And we ask that you use the Q&A button on the Zoom ribbon to submit any questions. And I will go ahead and then read those questions during the Q&A portion of this session and have our panelists respond. We do have a number of folks who are in listen-only mode, so I'll be reading those questions aloud as they come in. We'll have 3 speakers today. Each speaker will have about 15 minutes. And then we'll have time at the end for your questions. So you're welcome to populate your questions in the Q&A feature of this platform, and then we'll read them when we reach the after the sessions and have some time for questions. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm pleased to start off with Carrie Litkowski, who is our farm income team leader at ERS, and she is going to be talking to us today about our farm income and household wealth data that we have at ERS. So Carrie, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Did that work okay? Great.
You can see it.
Well, good afternoon. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to talk with you today about the ERS farm income and wealth statistics. For over 100 years, USDA has produced a calendar year estimate of net farm income, and it is one of the most highly or frequently cited USDA statistics. But net farm income is just one piece of our data product. You know, this program estimates, forecasts, and explains the economic performance of the US farm sector. It gives us like the big picture view of what's happening. The data provides guidance to policymakers, agricultural lenders and input suppliers, commodity organizations, farmers, and anyone who has an interest in the health of the farm sector. With this program, we put out a lot of data. I'm going to give you just a brief overview and show you some examples of the kind of information that we put out with our releases. So what do we produce? We produce annual, state, and US level historical estimates. So estimates for prior years, not a future year or a current year. Currently, we have state estimates back to 1949 on net farm income, and US estimates, some of those go back to 1910. We also produce national short-run annual forecasts for farm income and related pieces. We currently are forecasting 2020 and 2021. This first link here to the data will take you to our data files and our data visualizations, and that's a lot of what I'm going to be showing you today. The second link is where you can find a written discussion of our current forecasts, and it also has some nice charts as well. So we are currently forecasting farm sector profits or income to decline in 2020, as shown in this chart, which is featured on our data discussion. You can also get to it from the data page by clicking that summary of data findings off to the left. That's a sample of what's on our website. We have 2 primary measures of farm income that are shown on this chart. We have net farm income, which is a broad measure of the profits earned by farmers and those others who have a stake in the risks of agricultural production. We also have net cash farm income, which is the cash part earned from the sales of production. We measure income from the bottom up, meaning that we measure its component parts first, and that allows us to explain the drivers behind the changes in income. And the primary driver behind our 2020 and 2021 forecasts is direct government payments. These are payments to farm operators, largely from farm programs. In 2020, record level government payments to farmers, largely COVID-related aid, is forecast to boost income significantly. So that's the spike in 2020 that you see there. For 2021, we're forecasting government program payments will decline, and that will push income down a bit. But still, the measures, both measures of income are expected to be above average in 2021. All of this data and more is available on our website. We have interactive tables, of which this is an example of one of them. And we have tables on net income, cash receipts by commodity, government payments, production expenses, and the farm sector balance sheet. You can download the file directly from these interactive reports. You can select kind of if you want to see all the data or just the most recent data, and whether you want to see it like in current or nominal dollars, or if you want to see the values adjusted for inflation. We also have a CSV file that contains all of the data that we put out with each release. I think these interactive tables are probably one of the best ways to explore the kind of data that we have to offer. So I encourage taking a look at them if you're looking for data on farm income. But we also have 3 data visualizations that we put out, which you can use to explore the data through charts and maps and graphs. This first one I'm showing here is our Farm Income Atlas. And this is where you can map the components of farm income and compare them across states. Here I've selected to look at direct government payments from conservation programs in 2019. As you can see, Iowa led the nation in conservation payments to farmers at about $451 million in 2019. If you change the units, you could see that in Iowa, conservation payments amounted to about 22% of total direct government payments and 1% of gross farm income. You could also change the year and see how conservation payments have changed from year to year. The next data visualization allows you to get some quick stats about farm and the farm sector in a particular state. Here we have Minnesota. In 2019, net farm income was at $1.48 billion, putting it at its second lowest level in the past 12 years and ranking it 23rd across all states. My favorite feature of this data visualization is there at the bottom, where you can see the top 5 cash receipt commodities in the state and also the top 5 production expenses. So in Minnesota, the top cash receipt commodity is corn in 2019, and the top production expense was feed. In addition to providing data about farm income, we also have data on the level of assets and debt held by the farm sector. This is shown in our farm sector balance sheet, for which we also have a data visualization, which I'm showing you here. Since 1993, farm sector debt has increased more than 200% when not adjusting for inflation. Here I've chosen to look at farm sector real estate debt by lender. Most of the increase in real estate debt since 1993 has been in loans from the Farm Credit System. That's that top orange line, followed by loans from commercial banks, the tan line. Combined, loans from Farm Credit System and commercial banks account for about 53% of all farm sector real estate debt. And they accounted for over 90% of the increase that we've seen since 1993. So when do we release the data and how often? We release our data 3 times a year. In February, that's our most recent release, February 5th of this year, we released our forecast, an updated forecast for 2020, and then our first forecast for calendar year 2021. On September 2nd, that will be our next release. At that point, we're going to update our 2021 forecast again, incorporating the latest data as it has become available. And then we're also going to turn our 2020 forecast into an estimate, meaning that it's going to be based on more survey data, like in particular the Agricultural Resource Management Survey, the ARMS survey, and other data that has become available. We'll also at this time have our first state level estimates for 2020. So I think I'm interested to see those because they'll kind of give us, they'll actually be our first indication of how the COVID pandemic has affected farm income by state. Then in December 1st, we're going to update our 2021 forecast again. And then we'll start the process to cycle all over again in February of 2022, sorry, when we release our first forecast for calendar year 2022. That's just a brief snapshot of what we have. I encourage you, if you have any questions ever about what we have to offer or how to use the data or access the data, that you use this email address here because it goes directly for the farm income team, because it goes directly to myself as well as the other members of the team, and we'll get back to you shortly. And I look forward to any questions you have later. But for now, I will turn it over to Aaron. I'll stop sharing.
Great, thanks very much, Carrie. That was great. I always learn a little bit when I hear your presentation, so I appreciate it. Next, we have Aaron Rozencik, who's an economist with ERS, who's going to talk about the Survey of Irrigation Organizations, which is a new survey that we've produced in collaboration with NASS. So Aaron,
yeah, can you see my screen now?
But it looks like it's thinking.
Okay. Think a little harder, Zoom.
It's having a little afternoon slump. There we go. Now
okay,
I see it.
We're good to go. Well, thanks for the introduction, Kelly. Yeah, as Kelly said, I'm going to talk about the 2019 Survey of Irrigation Organizations, which is a data collection effort and project that I care a lot about. So it's a pleasure for me to talk about it with this group, and hopefully we can generate a lot of questions and some interest in this data product. I should also mention that I've been working with Stephen Wallander and Marcel Ailery on this project since I joined ERS nearly 2 years ago, and they've been very instrumental in putting this project together. So with that, I'll just jump into my presentation. So I'll start off with a little background about this survey. This was a collaboration between ERS, NASS, and OCE. ERS worked on developing the actual questionnaire for this survey, while NASS helped us with actually administering the survey out in the field. And OCE provided some funding to help build the list frame for the survey. And this survey focused on irrigation organizations, and we broadly divided irrigation organizations into one of two categories. The first being entities that deliver water to farms or ranches, as well as entities that manage on-farm groundwater use. And these are really important organizations because the decisions they make about water management affect how water is used on farms. And USDA already has a pretty good idea about how water is used on farms via data collection efforts such as the Irrigation and Water Management Survey. But we did not know nearly as much about these organizations that control the supply of water further up the stream or manage how groundwater is being used on farms. And so this was important because there had not been another similar data collection effort like this since 1978. So that's more than 40 years without a nationally representative data collection effort looking at these irrigation organizations. So that's another reason why this is such an exciting data product, is that for a long time we knew very little about these organizations that supply water to farms or manage how groundwater is being used on farms. And one of the interesting sort of differences between the 2019 survey and the 1978 census is that the 2019 survey included groundwater management organizations, whereas the 1978 survey did not. And that's mostly because there were very few, if no, groundwater management organizations in 1978. And some examples of these irrigation organizations would be ditch companies or irrigation districts, as well as irrigation mutuals Or for groundwater management districts, this might be natural resource districts that you see in Nebraska, or groundwater management districts that you see in Colorado, or sustainable groundwater agencies like you see in California. And this survey was developed in partnership with quite a few other federal agencies, including the Bureau of Reclamation, Bureau of Indian Affairs, as well as others, as well as regional, state, and local stakeholders who were really instrumental in helping us develop the questionnaire, as well as helping us identify the list frame, those organizations that we wanted to include in the survey, and doing some advertisement for us to help get out the word that this is an important data collection effort. And so this survey went in the field in spring of 2020, and we concluded data collection in June of 2020. And NASS did a really great job, despite the whole COVID pandemic, of really persevering and doing a great job collecting the data. And NASS released 5 data tables that provide both national and regional aggregates for some of the key variables collected in the survey. And that data is available in the link in this slide, as well as on NASS's API server, Quick Stats. And soon after that December 2020 release of the data, ERS released 3.
We seem. Are you there, Aaron?
I'm back, yeah.
Okay, you froze. I think either you froze, but your slides also went away for a second, or went away.
Weird. Let me reshare my screen.
Okay.
Where did I freeze at?
You froze. You were saying NASS. You were at the NASS tables.
Okay, shoot. Well, sorry, guys. I'll blame my internet.
That's all right. You're back, and I
Okay.
see your slides. So
We're back again. Okay. So NASS released 5 data tables in December, and these provided regional and national aggregates for some of the key variables collected in the survey. And those are available in the link provided on the slide, as well as on NASS's Quick Stats. And soon after that original December data table release, ERS produced 3 charts of note, which I'm going to go over later. We've also written a USDA blog post that provides some more context and background on the survey. All right, so here's the first of those charts of note that we released. And this goes over the functions of different irrigation organizations. We split these between primary functions and secondary functions. So over 90% of irrigation organizations engage in irrigation water delivery as one of their primary functions. So that shows that this is a big part of what these organizations do is deliver water to farms and ranches. More than 20% of organizations also manage how water is used on farms. So one of the interesting sort of findings that we found surprising with this is that there are quite a few of organizations that both deliver water to farms and ranches and also manage on-farm groundwater use. These organizations also engage in quite a few very important secondary functions. So these include managing residential and municipal water use, as well as generating electricity via water storage. Okay, I'm going to move on. So this is the second of those charts of note we released. And this chart looks at the sources of water that are being brought into irrigation organizations' storage and conveyance infrastructure. So what you see here is that nearly 30 million acre feet of water that was brought into irrigation organizations' storage and conveyance infrastructure came from federal projects. And so these would be water storage facilities and conveyance facilities owned by entities like the Bureau of Reclamation or the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The second biggest source of water for irrigation organizations is stream, lakes, and ponds. And so these would be direct withdrawals from natural water bodies. And so this sort of points to the important role that infrastructure plays for these organizations, because they need infrastructure to convey water from those streams and lakes to their farms and ranches that are their constituents. I'm going to move on. The third chart and final chart note that we released looks at where this water is actually going. And we split that into one of 3 categories: either a water delivery or an intentional release, perhaps to another downstream organization, as well as losses. So by far the biggest category of water releases or deliveries went to farms and ranches. So
Yeah, we had a freeze here with Aaron again. I'm going to give it another minute, folks, if you don't mind being patient. Sometimes the technology just doesn't work in our favor. Okay, you're back. But your slides.
Yeah, apologies again. Let's share my screen. All right, am I back?
It is back. You are back.
Where did I lose you all at?
We only lost you for 30 seconds or so.
Okay, great. I'm going to move on quickly then.
Okay, yeah.
So this is our third and final chart of note, which shows where that water is actually going that was being brought into irrigation organizations. We split that into one of three categories: deliveries, intentional releases, and losses. So by far the largest amount of water that was delivered by irrigation organizations went to farms and ranches, and that's over 40 million acre feet of water. The second largest category was conveyance losses. So this would be water that is lost to either seepage into groundwater or evaporation during the transport or conveyance of water. So this points to the really important sort of infrastructure that's owned by these organizations, and maybe it also points to the potential to increase the efficiency of these of the conveyance and storage infrastructure owned by these organizations. So moving on, ERS now has this micro data from the survey, and we have two initial studies in progress and plans to develop more sort of research products based on this data. So the first two of these studies is a study that looks at drought planning and resilience by irrigation organizations. And the second looks at storage and conveyance infrastructure owned by these irrigation organizations. I'm just going to quickly talk about both of these two preliminary figures from both of these reports, which are now in ERS's review process. So this is a figure on the x-axis shows the percentage of organizations with a drought plan. So a drought plan would be a formal sort of action plan that an organization would have written out that explains how they would react or adjust their operations in times of water scarcity. So some examples would include, there's less water this year, we're going to uniformly cut water allocations across users, or we're perhaps going to change our pricing structure during drought times, or we're going to pay some people to fallow previously irrigated land. So we split these percentages up into several different categories. We look at large delivery, medium delivery, and small delivery. And these size categories are based on the total amount of land that an irrigation organization can provide water to. So what you see here is that larger organizations are far more likely to have a drought plan. Nearly 40% of these organizations have a drought plan telling them, how are we going to operate when water is curtailed? This is an important way to communicate with their constituents and allow their farmers to plan for these times when they're not going to have as much water. And overall, roughly 20% of irrigations, if you look at the total category, roughly 20% of organizations have a drought plan. And here's my final slide that's looking at irrigation infrastructure. So we saw in that previous slide that there's quite a bit of water that's lost to conveyance losses in that goes into irrigation organization systems. And one of the means that water is lost is from canals that are unlined. So what happens in that case is that as water is being conveyed in a canal, that water is seeping into the groundwater and is not available for the farms and ranches downstream. So this figure looks at small, medium, and large organizations and splits out their total conveyance infrastructure into the length of infrastructure that's lined versus unlined. And so what you see here is that, and we're also looking at the length of each bar is the total miles of conveyance, the average total miles of conveyance infrastructure owned by these different size organizations. So your small organizations that irrigate less land generally have a lot smaller, have a lot less conveyance infrastructure, which makes sense. They're providing water to fewer irrigated acres. Whereas your large organizations generally have much larger and more extensive conveyance infrastructure systems. Another takeaway from this is that large organizations have a much higher proportion of their total conveyance lined, which means that I think there's an opportunity here to invest in conveyance infrastructure improvements that could really improve the overall efficiency of the irrigation infrastructure owned by these organizations. So this is my final slide. Apologies again for my internet issues, but I will move it on to Jen Bond, and I will stop sharing.
Great. Thanks so much, Aaron. I appreciate it. So next up, we have Jen Bond from our Markets and Trade Economics Division, who's going to talk about some of the commodity program data that we have in that group. So Jen, take it away.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll start to share my screen now and hope for the best. Let's see. Okay, and hopefully folks are able to see my screen. Is that working okay for folks?
It's still thinking.
Oh my,
there we
okay.
go. Nope, here we are. We're all set. So I can say thanks.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you very much. I hope my internet, crossing fingers, keeps me going here. Yes, I'd like to today share some data innovations out of the Market and Trade Economics Division, and also highlight that this presentation was put together with a team of individuals who are heavily involved in data, most especially Swan Pham, who is our new Deputy Director for Data Management. So very excited to work with her. My purview is Deputy Director for Outlook and Staff Analysis, and our two roles will be very intertwined. A lot of what Outlook produces is data. People come to us a lot for our data products, and so we constantly want to be working to improve those and make sure that they're meeting our stakeholders' needs. And so this requires a lot of interaction with stakeholders and also some engagement with new technology. And I think Swan's presence will really help us to catalyze a lot of the development of interesting things that we can do. Dana Golden, Bart Kinner, and Dylan Russell also contributed quite a bit to this presentation and are innovative members of our MTED staff. So I want to give a brief overview of the data that we put out by branches in the Market and Trade Economics Division. You'll get a sense, hopefully right away, there's a diversity of data and a lot of data products. Again, a lot of people come to us for our data products. That's one of the gateways into the ERS website. We've got everything from baseline data, tariff data, commodity price forecasts, cost of production, specialty crop data, state export data, and more. Maybe something important to note is that a lot of these are living products. These aren't static data products that we put out once. They're updated fairly regularly, many of them on a monthly basis. And more recently, we've had several that are updated on a weekly basis in an attempt to better address stakeholder needs. I'd also like to highlight some of the new products that we've been working on this last year and recognize that some of these products are a cross-divisional collaboration with folks in RAD and FED, and we appreciate that. We also rely quite a bit on NASS and AMS data. So it is a one USDA effort in the sense that we utilize data from all of our partner organizations to try to inform the public. So recently, in the past 6 months, our MTED Outlook program, so those are the individuals that provide analysis and support the rolled egg supply and demand estimates that come out every month. That group underwent a strategic planning exercise in which we invited a large number of internal and external stakeholders to come share their thoughts on our Outlook products and most specifically our data products. And what they were telling us in those meetings is that they would love to have a greater frequency of release for our data products. They'd like to have enhanced accessibility, so maybe machine readable or APIs. They'd also like us to see more reactivity, to have us be very responsive to changes in the marketplace, such as COVID. And when we had these meetings, COVID really was forefront on the mind. But as we know, stochastic shocks happen with some unexpected, but some regularity too. And so I think there was a sense that they wanted us to be able in real time, be able to assess the impact of weather shocks, pandemic shocks, and more, and to provide that advice to our stakeholders. Another element that was requested is an increased level of granularity. So we interpreted that as more disaggregated data, and we've attempted to respond by providing more frequent data, but also data that is disaggregated at the state level and on a monthly basis. So in a nutshell, some of the products, some are novel, that we developed or enhanced to address these stakeholder needs are shared here. and they include topics such as daily hog slaughter and analysis, weekly specialty crops movement. You can find that on our website. WASDE at a glance has been enhanced. We've got a number of additional visualizations that we're now involved in. We've been very supportive of the COVID charts of note, putting quite a few into our Outlook reports, but then also trying to promote those so that they have a wider audience. And many of those have used some of the novel data that we've worked to develop. We have some work on the impact of foreign tariffs on U.S. exports and state exports and import trade data products, as well as some monthly disaggregated trade data. So quite a bit of additional products. I'd like to highlight a couple of them here. I used to work in specialty crops. I love food. So of course, I'd like to start with the weekly fresh market vegetable movement and price tool. This is developed in a partnership with Gary Lucier and Wilma Davis, who helm our Vegetable Impulses program. And during the pandemic, early period of the pandemic, they felt that we could probably see some of the impact of COVID-19 in some of these shipment prices and movement data. And they started this series in May of 2020. And they were able to document some of the interesting changes that happened and to write extensively about that in their Vegetable Impulses Outlook. And that Outlook will be out tomorrow. There was also a December release and a May release last year. This data product spans all kinds of different fresh vegetable products, everything from asparagus to tomatoes and pretty much everything in between. And it provides some transformations of the data too, so that it's contextualized. You know, what are the differences between year, between month, and across some different categories. So a useful novel product. Also, I'd like to highlight our WASDE at a glance visualization. Every month when I go to write the Weed Outlook, I Google WASDE, and this is one of the very first things that pops up. So I think that there are a lot of people who are enjoying this visualization. I utilize it in my own work and contribute to it. The nice thing about this is instead of looking at just tables, which can be, kind of static and uninteresting, you've got this visualization that shows you graphically month-to-month changes and commodity by commodity changes and regional changes as well. So there's a lot of information contained in this one visualization that's updated monthly. There's also some aggregated tables as well, but it's a useful tool. And given its promotion in the search engine, I think a lot of people are enjoying this. All right. I'd like to also highlight our meat price spreads, some of our hog data, and some of the links to COVID-19. As many people know, the livestock industry was profoundly affected by COVID-19, and our livestock, dairy, and poultry team sought to utilize data and develop data products that explained the extent of the interruption in normal operations. And one of the products that was utilized quite heavily for that is our meat price spreads tool. And we actually have an app you can go to on the website and can customize some of the offerings there. This is also going to be showcased via the USDA Open Data Platform in coming months. So I think that some additional enhancements are underway. This data set shows monthly average price values and the differences in values at the farm, wholesale, and retail stages of the production and marketing chain for a wide variety of cuts of beef and pork and broilers. The price spreads are also reported over periods of months, 12 quarters and 24 months. And the historical files for this go back to 1970. So you can go back and see for quite a long period of time where those price spreads have fluctuated and how they've changed. We also utilize some hog stock data. I believe even in the April offering of the Livestock, Dairy, and Poultry Outlook report, this chart was updated and commented on. In this, we can definitely see, if you look at the blue line, you can see the tremendous drop off in cold pork stocks during May and the early time of the pandemic. And Mildred Haley and her team have written about this quite a bit in the LDP Outlook and continue to use this data to explain some of the transitions that have occurred in that sector during COVID. Another new product that we have, it's really pretty innovative, I think, is the state trade data. And Bart Kinner and Dylan Russell and Dana Golden contributed to this. And this is where we are tracking back export data to the state level. So exports happen, sometimes in the states that's different than where that product was produced. And so this product allows us to backtrack and have an assessment of the value of ultimately exported product to a particular state. And I think part of the novelty of this one is that it utilizes data from a large number of locations, including the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and census data as well. So it's quite an impressive aggregation of data. The visualization you see here is for California. And there's a lot of other presentations of the data, and I invite you to come take a look at all that we've got on offer on the ERS website with regard to this particular tool. So now I'd like to highlight a couple of data developments that are on the horizon. And I think I saw Swan Pham is among the participants, so she may also through the chat be able to speak to a greater degree about some of our initiatives. We are looking to provide tariff quota utilization database and develop some trade openness indices as part of our support for the open and competitive markets theme area that the Secretary has shared with us. As part of an appropriations bill request, we've been doing work on Puerto Rico and developing cash receipts and more for a data product that will be forthcoming in the next couple of months. Probably more broadly, we're working to improve the searchability across all of our different data sets. A comment from stakeholders is that we don't have a whole lot of interconnectivity between our data sets, and we're working to enhance that, especially for our crops, our commodities, the ones that are associated with the WASDE, so that we can be more of a one-stop shop as opposed to a mall with different shops and siloed data products. So that would ultimately include some co-linked commodity databases. We'd also like to enhance our use of machine-readable data products. And we've made some inroads on that. There's been some work in the specialty crop realm. It takes some time, but we are making progress. And we have been told by stakeholders that they appreciate data visualizations quite a bit. The other day in a town hall, the Secretary of Agriculture mentioned our Chart a Note series in particular. And based on the web hits for the WASDE at a Glance product, it's clear that people do like to have those visual representations. And so we are going to be working to offer more of that information-rich visual graphics and then to provide links to some of our more detailed research as folks need them. So with that, I'd like to pause here and turn it back to Kelly. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Jen. These were great presentations and provided a lot of useful, new, interesting information. We do have some questions in the Q&A. For those who may have joined us after we got started, if you do have a question, please post it in the Q&A button that's in the ribbon at the bottom of your screen. And I will be reading those questions and will provide answers. Some of our folks are joining just via listening mode, so I'll be reading all of the questions aloud. And there will be a transcript that will be posted following this session. So if you'd like to go back and take a look, you're welcome to do so, as well as the video. So let's get started. There were a couple of questions that I know some of our panelists answered as we were going along, but I'll just read them and direct them to you. There was a question about conveyance losses and whether those are large enough to care about. Do you have a plan to find out from organizations how they plan to manage the conveyance losses going forward? Example is using on-farm storage to recover tailwater for reuse. Aaron, I know you did provide an answer. Do you want to just summarize your answer to that question?
Absolutely, yeah, and thanks for the question. I think conveyance losses are large enough that it's something we should care about. And in the survey, one of the questions we asked was, what are some reasons, because so much of the conveyance losses are related to lining and unlined canals, what are some reasons that organizations or some constraints that are keeping organizations from lining their canals? And we provided several options, one of them being cost constraints, and another being recharge benefits by this. So overall, the majority of organizations cited cost constraints as a reason for they're not lining their canals. And the second largest category was the recharge benefits provided by, in terms of groundwater recharge benefits provided by this. So I think going forward, if we're able to do this survey again in the future, which I really much hope that we're able to, we'll be able to see how these organization conveyance losses change over time, and connect that change with other sort of organization level changes. For example, the amount of miles of their conveyance infrastructure that have been lined over time. So I think that's one way to look at how to reduce or diminish these conveyance losses.
Great, thanks very much. I'm going to jump to the next question, which is also for you, Aaron. What are examples of groundwater management? This comes in from Eric.
An example of groundwater management, one might be a limit on the amount of groundwater that an organization or that an individual irrigator is allowed to use, or the creation of a groundwater bank. So this would be like, for a given farmer, you're allowed to use X acre feet of water over 5 years, and within that 5-year period, you're able to allocate that water how you would like. Pump more in 1 year and less in another, or perhaps in some cases provide a platform to trade these rights for groundwater. In other scenarios, these groundwater management organizations serve more of a advisory role to just manage the status of the resource. And in other states, groundwater management organizations may be in charge of permitting for groundwater wells. So then because of that, they're also generally involved or in charge of data collection efforts in terms of groundwater use.
Great, thank you. Let's see, I think the next question, Carrie, you may have answered this, but I'll ask it and you can provide a synthesis of your answer. Do meat animals in the NFI tables just include cattle and hogs? Are there data showing cattle and hog income separately?
Yes, we have cash receipts separately. We have cash receipt estimates for over 100 different commodities. So we do have cash receipts separate for cattle and hogs. But if you're talking about net farm income for like hog operations or cattle operations, we do have like a secondary or a supplemental data that we have as part of our account as well, that using data from the Agricultural Resource Management Survey only, we can look at average net cash farm income by commodity specialization, meaning 50% or more of their value of production comes from a particular commodity, like say cattle. So we have that as well if you want to see how a particular subset of the farm sector is doing as well.
Great, thank you. The next question, which is the final one in our chat, so we do have a little bit of time if folks want to post additional questions, but the question goes to Jen. Are the field crop cost of production estimates by commodity only available for the US as a whole? Are there any state or regional breakouts of costs of production by crop?
That's a great question. And on the website, historically, there have been some regional breakouts. For example, soybeans, for wheat, Southwest and the West, cotton and more. Although more recently, I believe it has just been at the national level. And I'm trying to pull up corn now to see if we've got any sort of disaggregations there, but I do believe that it is just at the national level at this time.
Great, thank you. I'll just give a, go ahead, I see you were.
Apologies, okay, I stand corrected. So we do have some additional breakdowns. So if you, for example, go to the corn production costs and returns, while the spreadsheet says corn on the whole, and we don't have a separate spreadsheet for the different regions, within that spreadsheet that you click on, there's actually a wide variety of locations. So as disaggregated as the Southern Seaboard, for example, or Prairie Gateway or Northern Great Plains. So upon further investigation, it appears that we do have the data that whoever asked that question is looking for.
Great, well, thanks very much. Let's see, any other questions from folks? Again, use the Q&A feature if you would like to pose a question. I'll pause for a minute or so. These folks are, let's see. Someone came in, asked, this came in through the chat feature, said those are resource regions. Jen, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that.
I see that's Eric Dolman who provided that, and I'm not as familiar with the cost of production data. I just can see the different regional breakdowns there. So whoever asked that question, please feel free to email me and I'll direct you to the person that absolutely knows. There's a whole cost of production team led by Jeff Gillespie, who perhaps is on the line, but if not, I'll make sure you're connected to the right person.
Great. All right, well, thank you very much. I think at this point, we have answered all of the, oh, wait, I'm sorry, one more just came in. This question is for Jen. When will these enhancements, for example, the mobile optimization, be implemented? Do you have a timing on those modernization efforts?
That's a good question. And again, my colleague Swan Pham is on the line here. For some of these, we're very much in the exploratory phase, and we've got a large team of individuals who are affected by these. So it's, I understand, to be kind of a slow process, but we also feel the tide of web modernization coming our way at USDA as a whole, and are trying to be responsive and get out in front of those sort of changes. So if Swan is on and would like to perhaps provide a response in the chat, she's probably the very best person to be answering that on behalf of IMTED.
So a couple more questions have come in. Another one for Jen, a follow-up for the cost of production question. Split by economic region is available only for historical COP estimates, now available until 2019, but not for forecasted COP.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, I mean, I do invite users to go take a look on the website and see what is available there. And if it's not meeting your needs, let us know. Please feel free to send me an email or Jeff Gillespie, and we'll see if there's anything that we can do to address. I would like to note that I saw on the participant list Bill Lapp, who has been at previous data users and had asked for monthly trade data on wheat, and I'm happy to say that this year we were able to provide that. So we really do listen to the feedback that we receive at data users and have been working to be responsive to that. So Bill, if you're listening, it's in the yearbook tables. It's the final 2 yearbook tables last couple of months.
I think you got your appreciation from him in the chat feature. Let's see. This question comes from Lisa Jones. I'm not sure if this is the place to ask, but ERS currently has a small farm defined under typology as $350,000 or less, but NASS has a breakdown at $250,000. Do you know if this will change to reflect the ERS definition? I'm going to ask to see if maybe Carrie, is that something that you can speak to? You're nodding. Okay, thanks.
Well, I can't speak to it too much, but I am familiar with these breakdowns, and we have a lot of different breakdowns. 350,000 is the current one that we use for small farms, especially when we're talking about data that comes from the agricultural resource management. But I can't really talk to, how NASS set their small farm threshold, or if there's any thoughts on changing that.
Okay, and that's something we can also in the transcript Q&A follow up on that. I don't know if that's something, Joe, if you're still on, wanted to elaborate. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add at this time.
Bruno Arthur asked about email addresses for follow-up questions that come to mind, and I believe that a few of those email addresses have been posted in the chat. You can also always go to our ERS website. We provide a list of staff contacts for a host of different subject matter areas, and so that's another resource if you'd like. But we're a pretty helpful small group, so if you email one of us, we'll find the answer for you. Ryan Nielsen asked, when determining the total ag trade value between nations, are export values used? How are landed prices versus export value discrepancies addressed? Where are tariffs considered? Are exchange rates considered specifically in regards to phase 1 tracking? I'm not sure if we necessarily have someone who can speak to that here. I'll open it up to whether Jen, if that's.
I think it may pertain to that state trade tool. I'm kind of conjecturing, and there's a lot of nuance in that product. And I'd like to invite Ryan to send me an email. And I'd like to connect him with the team that worked on that. So that's Bart Kenner, Dylan Russell, and Dana Golden. We've got some documentation on our website too that hopefully addresses some of those questions. I don't want to say something incorrect, but I am happy to connect you with the right people who can speak more to those specific details.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Bill Lapp asked about understanding the food purchased for consumption at home versus away from home by commodity. And I'll put the email address in the chat. It would be Catherine Ralston in our food economics division. So she and I were communicating a little bit after, I believe you may have posed that question in the general session this morning. So I'll put that in the question or in the chat. The next one is for Aaron. Do you have any information on the response rate of your survey that you could share?
Yeah, absolutely. The response rate was 44%, and I will actually drop in NASS's their publication, which goes through how the response rate calculation was made. So given COVID-19 and the fact that this data collection effort hadn't happened for over 40 years, I think we were pretty happy with the 44% response rate.
Great, thank you. Let's see, so it just took a little bit of prompting to get a few questions coming, so I'll pause again. We've answered all that are in the Q&A feature, but we do have a few more minutes if folks would like to ask additional questions. Okay, well, I'm just typing that, Catherine's email. Okay, so I think that perhaps that exhausts the questions from this group. I'd like to thank my colleagues from ERS who did an excellent job presenting a suite of data products and data from the agency. It was actually challenging to figure out what to select for this meeting. So in the future, we'll likely do other breakout sessions and can highlight some other parts of our agency work. So thank you very much. As I had stated at the beginning, the recording of this session will be available. You'll get an email from Marissa with a link, and then there will be a transcript of the session as well that will be posted. So appreciate your interest in spending time with us this afternoon. Bye-bye, everyone.